Welcome to Vanguard, a podcast of radical traditionalism. Here's your host, Richard Spencer.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Vanguard. Today, it's a great pleasure to have back on the program Andy Nowicki. Andy, of course, needs no introduction for readers of AlternativeRight.com and our entire alt sphere, as it were, as he's a frequent contributor to a number of sites. Usually on these programs, Colin Liddell will be on board, but we've actually granted Colin a brief respite, a vacation for July. He's actually visiting his parents in Scotland, and we're trying to get him on the program, but unsuccessfully.
Some remote locale.
Yes, from a remote, undisclosed locale, but we're trying to get him on the program. We were unsuccessful, but I bet we will get to hear from Colin directly from his homeland at some point this summer, so stay tuned.
Yeah.
Today we were going to talk about the Olympics because that's obviously a major world event that's probably on everyone's minds. But the Olympics has actually been overshadowed by a controversy which is a bit ridiculous on its face, but I think actually gets to a lot of interesting and important things about our society. And I'm, of course, referring to the recent Chick-Fil-A controversy. I think it brings up a lot of interesting things, obviously gay marriage, but also implicit whiteness and also this question of shibboleths on the part of right-thinking liberals. What defines those? I think it's an interesting question. We're going to basically talk about this, and then maybe we'll get a chance at the end of the podcast to speak a little bit about the Olympics and some of these kind of low-hanging fruit, like people getting expelled from the Olympics for tweeting something that was mildly offensive or something like that.
Yeah.
But actually, before we even talk about Chick-fil-A, Andy has seen The Dark Knight again, and he's had a lot of thoughts.
Didn't get shot the second time either.
Say again?
I said I managed not to get shot either time that I saw it.
That is good, because random mass shootings is a real major social problem which we need legislation to solve. So I'm glad you were able to survive.
Exactly. But that's how I emerged out the cave.
But anyway, so you saw it again. I need to go see it again because I'm gearing up for some big Christopher Nolan piece once I can get my head above water here. But anyway, Andy, so let us know what were you thinking about this second time around?
Well, I was tasked with doing a write-up of The Dark Knight Rises for The Last Ditch. I had written an article for Countercurrents about the shooter, who we talked a little bit about last time, James Holmes. But this time I was just focusing on the film itself, and just sort of getting things straight in my mind. And it's like most Christopher Nolan movies, and I enjoy Nolan's work a lot. We also discussed that last time. We failed to mention Inception. I'm remembering we talked about a lot of his movies, but that was quite a flick too. But like it and like other movies of his, somewhat convoluted, a lot of storylines, a lot of characters, a lot of stuff to follow, which can be really interesting and cool, and can be a little bewildering at times as well. Can be a strength and a weakness. But among all the characters that were stuffed into this movie, I thought I recognized somebody who seemed like a stand-in for President Obama. And it was during the scene, actually after Gotham has been taken over by Bane and his cronies. the U.S. government sends out sort of this small group of men to try to nose things out and see if they can negotiate something. Uh-huh. And the man in charge of this group is this mixed race guy with a resonant voice, slightly aloof, smart, maybe a little pompous, who just reminded me a whole lot of Obama. And he ends up, I don't know if you remember this character or not, he was identified as Captain Jones.
Oh, he comes in and he meets with Jim Gordon and the Robin character, his name I'm forgetting at the moment, and right. they're kind of making up the underground, and he's kind of their liaison to the establishment in the outside world. Right, and Robin, the character of Robin, gets really frustrated with him because he seems to think that we just have to negotiate something here. Robin wants some action. The guy who plays Robin, Joshua Gordon-Levitt, wants action, and he even calls him an appeaser. So I don't know whether Nolan. I don't. It's hard to identify where Nolan is on the political spectrum, if he's anywhere, recognizable. But he clearly riffs on certain things, and it seemed interesting. This character who looked just like Obama, sounded just like Obama, was thoroughly ineffective in doing anything. He ends up getting ambushed and killed by Bane, and nothing happens. And so I'm not quite sure what to make of that, but there you go. And the other thing is, I don't know if you remember the very first scene of the movie when where Bane is taken in. They don't know who it is because we don't see him yet because he's got a bag over his head. Yeah. And a couple of his henchmen are taken up in a plane by the CIA guy, and I don't know what his name was or if he was identified. But he reminded me a lot of oh man, I'm blanking out on his name right now. One of the Santorum. He it just struck me. This guy had again the look and the demeanor of Rick Santorum. He was kind of smirking and arrogant. He was a real jackass.
He was.
He didn't know what was really going on, and he was
had no idea. Was just played for a fool. Yeah. And again, ended up being spectacularly unsuccessful, and so I didn't know if this was. I mean, maybe last year when Nolan made the movie, maybe he was thinking that Santorum was going to end up being the Republican nominee, which of course hasn't happened. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I just, but it could have happened, and I don't know. Maybe that was with these two characters, these two fairly minor characters. One being this CIA guy who more or less tortures or quote unquote waterboards. Doesn't literally waterboard them, but takes them up in a plane and tries to terrify them into giving out these secrets, and they're both and then this other guy who looks and talks just like Obama, and they both represent the state in some capacity, and they're both completely ineffective in dealing with Bane and his crew, and they walk right into the trap. I don't know. It's just kind of an interesting thing to speculate because it's definitely not overt, and I don't even maybe it's just a total accident and I'm just reading things into it that aren't there. But I wouldn't put it past Christopher Nolan to just put little elements like that in there to just play on things.
Oh yeah. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he even told the actors to you're kind of like Rick Santorum here or something like that. I wouldn't be surprised at all. No.
I mean, if you see it again, see if you don't note the resemblance on both of those actors' parts.
I will definitely note that. I'm curious to do that. I think there might even be kind of more to it all. Clearly, also the act named for Harvey Dent, the Dent Act, is clearly some kind of patriot act,
right?
And it's treated quite positively by Nolan.
Yeah.
But again, in some ways, as we've talked about before, the whole world, the Gotham world of Christopher Nolan, is in many ways very unrealistic, because it some ways resembles the world of Gotham in the 1930s or something, when the Batman comics were created. There seems to be these rich people, and it's a great city, but it seems like the big problem is crime, and it's petty crime, in fact. But they don't. It's a kind of a little bit of a binary, good versus evil world, and you don't think about maybe a modern city where race would be a very important thing, or the fact that the leaders would likely be cultural Marxists who would be right. tapping into our phone line before they were tapping into phone lines about people actually interested in committing violent acts. So, in some ways, Christopher Nolan kind of presents a kind of maybe kind of almost like a right-wing fantasy or something. It's like, we've got to have this power so we can take it away from the mobsters. Something. It's got to...
Which is kind of what we were talking about last time, I recall.
Yeah, definitely.
That whole...
Well, anyway.
But he as you say, he throws in little things like the Dent Act, which makes us recall the Patriot Act, but without directly, referencing it or, being overtly topical. And there's also, of course, all the rhetoric that Bain spouts that parallels the Occupy Wall Street rhetoric.
Although it is interesting, and people have mentioned this. The movie was written and filmed before autumn of 2011. I think maybe there actually perhaps it was filmed after that, but it was certainly written before Occupy Wall Street got going. But at the same time, they didn't really need Occupy Wall Street. I mean, this kind of left has been around for quite some time, and you can see it in like the 2001 anti-globalization protest and so on and so forth. Then I think also he was clearly channeling the French Revolution or maybe the Paris Commune with all those trials and things like that. So
the battlements and the ramparts and that.
Yeah. And it was kind of like the Paris Commune in a way, in the sense that you had this city that was kind of isolated and chaotic. But but anyway, I guess, I have looked around the alt sphere, and you see, I don't even know if this man's a part of the alt sphere. You see all these people kind of bashing Batman, Larry Oster, or, so I think the Paleos don't really like this stuff. I think they kind of maybe, they have a kind of knee-jerk reaction to anything.
Well, Oster, I read Oster's thing, which I guess you responded to, or maybe you responded to something different. But his critiques was just so stunningly familiar and trite to me.
Yeah, it could have been of any movie, essentially.
Just like, do you know all these? How could anybody? It's inherently corrupting because there's all this violence and all these terrible things happen in the movie The Dark Knight. So of course it's going to lead to a mass shooting because it's just corrupting society. I mean, it's the whole line that I just laid into in one of my articles for alt-right, Sex and Violence, Traditionalism.
The
title.
I remember that.
Just this whole, if there's content that, if people do bad things in it, if there's violence or sex or profanity, then that just means everything, and context means nothing. And I just think, that's ridiculous.
Oh yeah. I think so as well. Larry's done this before. I remember he got very excited about like a grindcore incident. It was kind of like the family that listens to heavy metal together kills each other together. So there's some headline he wrote. Yeah, it was essentially almost like a Tipper Gore like argument.
Yeah.
It's like, ooh, we better put ratings on, rock music, because then that's, I don't know. I mean, obviously not that so much of our pop culture isn't, ridiculous and disgusting. Sure. I'm not going to deny that, but But I think the challenge is to find those things that actually are kind of radical and in some ways subversive. Yeah. I'm also reminded, thinking about your article from around a year and a half ago or so, and other things. I'm reminded of this incident that happened when I was actually an undergraduate at the University of Virginia. So this is about 10 years ago or maybe 12 years ago. And I was in a computer lab, and I was, of course, off in the Mac section because at a computer lab, they would have like 200 PCs and they'd have like 2 Macs, and I would be over there. Anyway, not surprising. But anyway, I remember I was over in the Mac section, and there was this young girl who was there with her mother, and for some reason, I guess her mother was visiting, and she was reading aloud her prized essay on the case for censorship. And it was basically exactly what you'd expect. She was a very churchy kind of young girl, and she was kind of like, oh, this is the devil's work. Well, she might have not said that, but, essentially she said that. And this is going to teach people violence and sex and so on and so forth. And so I actually just interrupted, and I said, I know of this really great piece of work. And the whole thing is based on incest, and it involves usurpers, murder, sexual lust towards one's mother, ghost, poisoning, and actually at the very end, it involves violent conquest of a country is the last scene. And I said... Yeah, I said, it's a great work. And she was like, oh, that is just disgusting. We need to censor that. And I was like, and I think perhaps some of our listeners are catching on. I've pretty much described the plot of... Hamlet, yes. I could have also described King Lear, which seems to also deal with murder and incest.
Yes.
So anyway,
most Shakespeare, most the Bible.
The Bible, right? So I mean, I just obviously life is a kind of nasty thing, and I think what's brilliant about Hamlet is that it's not pornography. It's pornography might be a kind of like uncritical. Two-dimensional presentation of sex and violence.
Right.
That is porn. But Hamlet's not porn. I mean, it obviously delves into those gothic aspects of ourselves, but then also looks to the stars and probably looks down at hell too. I mean, it's a truly human work. So anyway, I don't support censorship, although there's some of this stuff is produced is so crappy, I probably would want to censor it on reasons of taste, not morality, however.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's move on to this interesting controversy involving the fast food chain Chick-Fil-A. And as I was saying, I don't think I've ever... I'm writing a little blog in this. I don't think I've ever written the word Chick-fil-A, and I've just discovered that it's Chick-Phil... capital A. For whatever reason, some marketing guy thought that was really memorable or something.
Well, it worked for them, I guess.
But essentially, this was an organization created by a man named Truett Cathy, who I have seen some things on him. He is a billionaire, and he obviously created a successful business, so... I can't really argue with that. He's also a Southern Baptist, and I think I've seen some profiles, and he is very, very. His faith is probably the most important thing about his life. You can't interview him without him citing Bible verses and things like this. He's clearly one of those. And his son Dan is probably cut from the same mold, although he's a little bit younger. And he was interviewed, and he gave what is, at least from my mind, a very mild, maybe even quietistic critique of gay marriage. He basically talked about positive things like we're all with our first wives, we the operators of this company, and we support strong families and so on and so forth. And then I think he said, again, something very mild. Which was that, who are we to redefine marriage? Again, this man was not claiming that all fags are going to go to hell or something. This was this is a very polite thing. I don't think there's any evidence of them discriminating against gay customers or employees. I mean, anyway.
Nope.
So this, of course, was launched a controversy. I'm sure everyone listening to this is aware of it. First, some protest and some planned kiss-ins or something like that. And then Mike Huckabee got involved, and he wanted a Chick-fil-A Appreciation Day. And so...
Mm-hmm. That was yesterday.
Right, which was yesterday. It was funny. I actually took a trip into Glacier National Park yesterday. And so for about the entire day, I was without cell phone access or really radio or anything like that. And when we were driving out, I turned on the radio, and everything was Chick-fil-A. And I was kind of like, I enter a alternative universe. Like when I was in the, why are we talking about this? Anyway, so Mike Huckabee did this, Chick-fil-A Appreciation Day, and essentially red state Americans went out and ate at Chick-fil-A. And of course, there's nothing really wrong with that. But I think this brings up so many levels of the debate. I think we should discuss it. And let me start out with this one, Andy, and that is that gay marriage was probably something unknown to people 15 years ago. It was barely known to them 10 years ago. And 15 years ago, they probably looked at it as some kind of curious or amusing notion, something that was very minor or fringe-worthy. And yet, by pretty much in the last couple of years, but certainly by 2012, it has become the ultimate shibboleth. And what I mean by that, shibboleth, of course, isn't this true? It's a biblical reference. It's actually the Israelites, if you pronounce the word shibboleth in a certain way, they knew that you were actually of an enemy tribe and they'd kill you. Isn't that true? Mm-hmm. Go look it up. Something like that. Anyway, so I think that is the etymology of the term. But anyway, so it has become the ultimate shibboleth. It shows whether you're on the side of the angels or the devils. And I think that is really remarkable in the sense that, say, supporting free market capitalism, that's not a shibboleth. Or being anti or pro wars in the Middle East, that doesn't seem to be a shibboleth. You can still be a cool kid and support wars or libertarian economics or something. And those used to be big issues for the left, obviously. But now it's if you oppose or you criticize the idea of gay marriage, it is just like you might as well have just killed a puppy or something. I mean, it's just, I mean, how did this happen? I have no idea. How did this happen?
I don't know. I don't know either. I mean, it probably was. I think we've talked about this issue before, and it's the new big thing. 10, 15 years from now, people will probably have moved on, and the cool kids will be talking about some other equally ridiculous thing or issue. But for now, for whatever reason, you're right.
Do you think it's
the thing?
Yeah. Do you think it's maybe because it's kind of like the left has won in so many ways. You have every conservative now claims to be the true inheritor of, Martin Luther King. And so, like, all liberal values have triumphed. And they, in some ways, need to just invent this. Like, I almost think that because the human memory is so flexible, people can remember things, which is essentially they just imagine them. But they remember them like they actually happened. And I just think I almost have this notion that gay marriage is becoming remembered where there were like straights-only signs sitting outside courthouses and churches. And there are all these poor, like, downtrodden gays just wanting a chance to get inside, poor gay folk who didn't have a chance in life. It was a different time.
Yeah.
I almost think that people now imagine this or something. I mean, it's just, it's truly an absurd situation. And also, I just mentioned that a good friend of mine tweeted this. This was a true poetic tweet. And it was something to the effect of 15 years from now, the conservative movement is going to be apologizing for the whole Chick-fil-A controversy. And then 25 years from now, the conservative movement is going to claim that it invented gay marriage. And it's kind of, you see that exactly with the Civil Rights Act. It literally goes from opposition to apology to we invented it. I have to say I don't support the idea of gay marriage, but it's hard for me to be on any side of this issue. But what do you think about those ideas?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of things that can be said about this just as a cultural marker, which you've been doing. But what struck me about this whole brouhaha in the first place is, this. So the owner says that, as you say, in the nicest possible terms, he says, "Look, these are our principles. That's just what we believe."
Yeah.
And then it becomes this, oh, what a terrible thing. How could he have said that? Let's have a kiss in, and that'll show him if we have a bunch of gay kisses, a bunch of people, a bunch of men kissing other men, women kissing other women outside of Chick-fil-A or whatever. And it went on from there. But what strikes me as so infantile about that reaction is, even if you're pro-gay marriage, you've got to realize that, or if you're against gay marriage, however you feel on this issue or on other issues, you've got to know that, going through the day, buying things in different places, you're going to end up putting money in the pocket of somebody who disagrees with you on some significant issue, some issue that's significant for you. And, I mean, is that really going to become your criteria for whether you do business with that person or not? I mean, it just, if you don't want to eat at Chick-fil-A, fine. And of course, people have the right to eat where they want and not eat where they don't want. But I simply, there's something that is so ridiculous about the extreme reaction of boycotting somebody just because he again sees the world differently than you. It's so myopic. And you've got to realize, if you really use your mind and think about it, you've got to realize that even if you avoid getting Chick-fil-A, you're still going to end up, you can't avoid, again, putting money in the pocket of somebody whose principles go against yours in some way, whether it's gay marriage or anything else. And I don't know, you should it just seems to me like if you like a product and you feel like you can afford it, you should get it. And if you don't like it or if you're not interested in it, then you shouldn't get it. But this whole idea of making the ideology of the person selling the products the issue is ridiculous, which is, of course, what the people yesterday who were buying up Chick-fil-A on the other side.
Right, yeah, I mean, they kind of
were doing the same thing.
Yeah,
but I kind of, on a primal way, just as a kind of middle finger and a screw you to the PC Nazis, I kind of, just in a visceral way, I kind of liked seeing that happen. So I'll admit that.
You can indulge in that. Don't worry. Yeah. And obviously not only not buying something from someone because you disagree with something he said, but also what Rahm Emanuel and who's the mayor of Chicago now and the mayor of Boston, what they were talking about, which is like denying someone a permit. Not based on uncleanliness or something or faulty product or fraud or whatever, but just on the basis of gay marriage. I mean, not only is that illegal, it's obviously illegal, but it's just bizarre. I mean, I can't believe they would do that. It shows how truly childish they are.
And Jim Goad pointed out in his article at Tacky Mag that Rahm Emanuel was close allies with the black Muslims who pretty much rule much of Chicago, and they are incredibly anti-gay. And they have a restaurant that they fund and everything, but Emanuel's fine with them. So that gets around to your your whole thing about, the cultural marker of Chick-fil-A as being, white Southerners who are religious bigots, or quote unquote.
Well, it's not even just the religious bigot; it's what they are. It's white Southerners, Christians,
right?
And
their ethnic identity.
Yeah, it is their ethnic identity, and I think this is just the kind of the implicit whiteness that's just this whole thing is just reeking of. When I saw some of those images of people going to Chick-fil-A, that it was clearly looked like some kind of country, Western concert or a NASCAR event or something. I mean, it's very, very white. And so that you kind of, in some ways, again, I don't like any of these controversies. They just have I just find them distasteful, to be honest. But at the same time, you clearly kind of see whose side Rom is on. It's just kind of like the black, he probably disapproves of these, Louis Farrakhan types who don't like gays or whatever. Yeah. And I'm sure he thinks their religion is total bogus. But he's kind of on their side. They're the minority racists that he wants to support. But a completely benign, we can talk more about that, but a food chain that represents white people in some, however vague manner, it does represent white Christians, needs to be opposed. Like, that's not Chicago values. We're going to keep them out. We're going to ruin their business.
Not Chicago values. That's funny.
Yeah, Chicago values. I mean, that's almost like, how can you even say that with a straight face? And I lived in Chicago for a little while. I like Chicago, but
sure.
Just saying Chicago values, you start to laugh. I mean.
Yeah.
But anyway, I should point out this. I don't want to sound like too much of a traditionalist ogre or something, but in some ways, this whole support of Chick-fil-A is also rather one-sided. It's kind of supporting it as the ultimate Christian traditionalist business, because at the end of the day, it is fast food, and at the end of the day, it represents people not sitting around a family dinner table and enjoying a meal. It ultimately represents people eating in their car and, eating in a matter of 5 minutes, fast food, chomping down and chicken and waffle fries and ketchup, and then, getting in their car and driving off. It also represents obesity, which is, although it's chicken, a little more healthier than other things, but so in some ways, Chick-fil-A, let's not joke around. It does not. Chick-fil-A is kind of, again, I don't want to single them out. I don't want to attack them, but it is in a way kind of part of the problem. I think when a lot more women going to work, when people getting divorced, families being broken up, this has coincided with the fast food craze. And so anyway, I don't think we should forget any of that. And I think it's a little silly to promote a chicken restaurant as, the expression of our values.
Yeah. I'm with you there.
Yeah. Let me just say a few more words on the Chick-fil-A controversy, and particularly in gay marriage. And I think Andy might actually even maybe disagree with me on some of these, but when I think I've told this story a couple of times on these podcasts because I think it's quite funny and it's also quite telling. And that is when I used to live in Park Slope, Brooklyn, which is, a paradise for swipples and, silly liberal white people, whom I love, of course. I probably closer to them probably than anyone else. But anyway, it was obviously it was a paradise for them. And on weekends, there would always be some do-gooder with a clipboard out on the major roads. And he'd always be talking about, this or that. But one of the big ones was marriage equality, so-called. And they would also say, do you want to sign this petition for marriage equality? And I would always react. I would say, no, gays need to be liberated from the bourgeois tyranny of marriage. And they wouldn't get it, basically. But anyway, what I was pointing out...
That used to be the line.
Right.
That used to be the standard bearing line among the among the lefties.
Oh, without question. I mean, this is a kind of weird mutation of the left that they're supporting marriage, and because when you support marriage as kind of the ultimate endgame of gay liberation, I mean, I don't know what they want. I don't know what they even would want next after you have gay marriage, because I can't. It's hard to even say that there's a great deal of discrimination in corporations. I mean, all these multinational corporations, they'll give health care to your gay live-in or give, there's no, of course they'll probably claim there's discrimination, but there's not.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Sure.
But, this is marriage is the ultimate endgame, but in doing that, you're in some ways, you're promoting heteronormalcy essentially as the ultimate goal of homosexuality. And you're also kind of promoting the upright, more normal gays, as opposed to the, say, polymorphously perverse underground of, S&M and
the leather bar.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're promoting the gays that are the least offensive to the vast majority of white Christians, and I think this is probably, I think when I've talked to a lot of people, normal people who probably do support gay marriage, when you say gay marriage, they think in their mind that the nice man who cuts their hair, or they have a friend, who owns a pet store. I'm of course indulging in terrible stereotypes here, but you get the point. They don't.
I'm so offended.
These gay people aren't at all hostile towards them. They're generally friendly and nice, and they don't want to seem like they're against those decent gay people.
No.
Yeah.
They just want to be nice. Yeah.
Right. They just want to be nice. And so I don't know, from the standpoint of a leftist revolutionary, you might, it seems like gay marriage would be kind of the ultimate sellout. Go ahead.
What it makes me think of is it used to be in the days of the Soviet Union, and I studied this a little a few years ago, how the party line would sometimes be polymorphously perverse in the sense that it would shift overnight, practically, and so it's what Orwell satirized in 1984, where Oceania is at war with East Asia, and then all of a sudden the next day Oceania is at war with whatever the other country was, and they've always been at war with this other country, and everything else goes down the memory hole.
Right.
And so like in the Soviet line was to be allies with the Nazis. People don't know that, but that was the case for like a year or so, and then after Hitler invaded the Soviet Union, then the line turned, and then they were anti-Nazi.
Yeah.
And so that's this reversal on marriage almost seems like the same thing when you don't really have any principles in the sense of deep abiding principles, but your main loyalty is just to the party line. Then you just find yourself jerking in all these different contortions depending on whatever the party line is on a particular day. That's kind of what this reminds me of.
I think it is true. There is a kind of totalitarian aspect of it, of this running with the cool crowd. I think that's absolutely true. And
who knows what the cool crowd is going to be saying 10 or 15 or 20 years from now.
Right.
I mean, who knows?
Yeah. And it's a kind of study in social mood and the social mind, so to speak. A lot of conservatives don't even like talking that way. It's like, oh, we're all individuals or whatever. Well, no, you're not. Right. I mean, you're part of you're part of a society, and you adopt certain positions, and there is a kind of collective way of thinking. There's certainly collective moods. There's ways that crowds act, and you can think of that crowd not only as in a center square, but also the crowd online, and so on and so forth, in your church or whatever. I mean, there's clearly these things are very important. They're very difficult to get your mind around, because it's hard to kind of quantify or pin down how a society is thinking. and things. But these are clearly clear, and I think there, to go back to, I mean, you can think about also with America. America was very pro-Soviet in the 1930s. They had all these kind of Hollywood movies about Uncle Joe and so on and so forth. Yeah. And then there was a kind of 5 to 7 years of transition, and then there was a kind of in a Cold War, and I think probably people just forgot all about all that pro-Soviet propaganda, and it was kind of like,
just like Orwell,
we've always been against.
This has always been the case.
So it's a very interesting thing. But anyway, Andy, I know you have to run, so let me just end with one quick point, and we'll have to we'll hold off on the Olympics, and we'll just save all that stuff for the next podcast. As I was saying, it's kind of low-hanging fruit. I think people can imagine what our opinion of, expelling someone for tweeting a mildly offensive line or whatever, or doing an opening ceremony where you have the National Health Service. I mean, this is so pathetic. Anyway,
I'll have to do my homework on that one. I haven't actually watched the opening ceremony yet, but I've heard a lot about it.
Yeah, it's pretty. When the Chinese did the opening ceremony, they were like conquering the oceans and their 1,000-year tradition or something, and it's like the British. They're like, we have diversity and free healthcare. It's like, wow, this used to be an empire. Anyway, again, I don't want to sound like I'm some American xenophobe or something. America's not in very good shape, but it was pretty sad to see kind of like cool Britannia on stage. It's very, very sad. Well, let me just end. We'll just end this conversation on this idea I had, and that is, what is a greater threat to gay marriage? What is a greater threat to the institution of marriage? Gays who want to play house and mimic heteronormalcy, or Newt Gingrich? Obviously, it's a contrived question, but my answer to that is
a rhetorical question, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a rhetorical. It's kind of a false polarity or whatever. But my answer to that question is Newt Gingrich, because it's this guy who's shockingly immoral.
He's got the anti-gay marriage crowd on his side.
Exactly. Right? That's what's the worst thing.
The traditional marriage people, voting for him.
Yeah, exactly. That is what you pinpointed. I mean, that's what's so horrible about him. His behavior in his life is shocking and disgusting. I guess we've seen this before of trading wives and affairs and all this kind of stuff. But what's so awful about it is that he presents himself as this leader of tradition, and all those people who are buying Chick-Fil-A's to express their morality were voting for this ogre with I don't know. It really it's a little bit depressing. It makes it to the point where it's hard to really be on the side of these guys at Chick-fil-A. Anyway.
Sure, I see your point there, definitely.
Well, anyway, any final words on this subject, Andy, before we wrap it up?
It'll be interesting to see how it develops. I understand the kiss-ins are planned for tomorrow, so I guess when people hear this, it'll be over. But it might make for some entertaining viewing to go out to a Chick-fil-A somewhere.
Well, yes. Unfortunately, there are no Chick-fil-A's in my neck of the woods. We don't have any of those. But I'm sure a lot of teenage boys will go to Chick-fil-A so they could see, they have some image of like hot
lesbians
girls.
Making out.
Yeah, doing a little lesbo lip lock. They're going to probably be very disappointed.
Yeah, I imagine so. It'll be interesting to see how it develops. But who knows?
Well, anyway, thanks for being on the program again, Andy, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.